Okay, so good morning. We are in Revelation chapter 14 today. It is December 23rd. Today's my husband's birthday, and I did not wish him a happy birthday. Shoot. Okay, loser. That's all right. So that is today's date. If you are journeying on YouTube with us, and we will be tackling Revelation chapter 14. So we're going to do a review. We are going to just go to Sunday's section, which was chapter 12. Have you guys gotten a teaching on this? I'm not sure if Sunday you did or not, but for the sake of my ladies here, I would just like to give some clarity. We're not going to read down through all of these chapters that we have gone over Sunday and Monday, but I do want to tell you who that great sign in heaven was about. It was the woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and on her head was a garland of 12 stars. That is speaking of Israel. And so, just so you know, like in the timeline of events of Revelation, we're sort of in the halfway point come chapter 12 after the two witnesses that came on the scene. So we know that the tribulation period is a 7-year period, and all of those seals and all of those first trumpets all happen within the first 3.5 years. Okay. And so the two witnesses sort of mark, whether they were there throughout that time period, because it said the amount of time that they were given to be witnesses, which was 3.5 years. So their death sort of marks the center of that tribulation period. Okay. And then we have chapter 12, and this is talking about Israel. Now, chapter 12 is really a reflection of the past, present, and future. So it's not like we step out of the events, but it's just a reflection. Like it's just a different perspective, and it's stuff that that has happened, that is happening, and that is still going to happen. And so that's what chapter 12 is, because it opened up with this woman. And so I'm telling you that is talking about Israel. And then it started to talk about how she gave birth to a child, and that is the Messiah. Like we know that the Messiah, Jesus, was to come through Israel, right? You guys know this. And so then the enemy is mentioned here, this other sign, a dragon, and the dragon is, often referred to as Satan. And he's got these heads and horns. And I don't know if you guys were like, what the heck is this? What does all of this mean? The 7 heads and the 10 horns. Well, the dragon is Satan, and the 7 heads is it's Rome. There is the city of 7 hills, which is in Rome. And it refers to the city from where the Antichrist will come. If you guys remember way back in chapter 2, when I was going over some of the churches with you, and I was talking about a specific church era, and it was really the Roman Catholic Church. And so we're going to see a revival of that in the tribulation period. Not good. It's like the harlot, okay, which you guys will read about in like a few chapters from now. You'll read more about her. She's mentioned today, like Babylon and stuff like that. Okay. Anyways, so the 7 heads is Rome, and it also refers to a geographical place. And the 10 horns refer to Satan's political base on earth. The horns are just like Daniel. Okay. Again, Daniel prophesies about all of this stuff too. The horns are just like the 10 toes. There's this 10-nation confederation. And all a confederation is a political union of sovereign states, but in this case, nations. Okay. So in the Great Tribulation period, it'll be a, union of countries, and it will be for one common action. Okay, so you see like sort of you see the enemy and his reign, and there's places on earth that he's coming from. He draws a third of the stars from heaven, and we know that took place when Satan was kicked out of heaven. He brought a third of the angels with him, his devils, right? And so this is all like past stuff. in the first few verses of chapter 12. And so then the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth to devour her child. And we see that like in Matthew chapter 2, we can go read the Christmas story and read about Herod, who heard that there was going to be a king and how he just wanted to kill the king. My ladies here, we just had a live presentation of this Sunday night. It was kind of cool. It was like a one-man play, and he went over like the story of Jesus, basically his birth and death all the way to his death. But like the Christmas story was found even on Sunday because it's talking about Jesus's birth and how he came and how from the time he was born, Herod or evil, enemy behind it wanted him dead. And there's like a couple thousand years in between just verses 5 and 6 from chapter 12, just so you guys know. This happens once in a while in the Old Testament. It happens a lot of times. In the book of Acts, it won't be thousands of years in the book of Acts, but there will be like a jump of time, a space of time between verses. So between verses 5 and 6, there's like a couple thousand years because it talks about the male child that was to be born. And then it talks about the tribulation period in verse 6. Okay, so you guys see that chapter 12, verse 5 and 6, talking about Christ's birth, the reason he was coming, how the enemy tried to kill him by having Herod slaughter all the male children 2 years old and under. And then it jumps to the tribulation period where Israel flees into the wilderness, this place prepared by God. And that's really cool because we know the scriptures, like Christians know the scriptures, and we're reading these prophetic verses about what's to happen in the future. And so Jordan isn't a part of Israel right now, but at one time it was. And in Jordan, it's like right beside Israel, there is a place called Petra. It's this rock. You can Google this when you've got the freedoms to do that, or maybe your staff can do it with you. And you can actually go look at this old rock city. It's extremely well protected. Like it's so interesting because the way you get to it is through these tiny little walk where you'd have to walk single file to get in. And once you're in, it's huge. And it's this huge rock, Petra. And so there years ago, I mean, for lots of times, like over 20 years, because I've been learning about this for at least that long. So I'm sure it's been even longer than that, that there were people who put New Testament Bibles at Petra. Because the Jews who actually are in the tribulation period, they're the ones that didn't believe in the Messiah until all of this happened. So they have their Old Testament belief, but not their New Testament belief. And so there is waiting for them the New Testament scriptures at Petra where they will go, where they will flee to. And it's an easily defended place because of how it's made up. It's very interesting. It's so intriguing. If you just go look and, you could, in a sense, protect this rock city with just a few people because the only way in is like a single file line through the crevices. It's very awesome. So, you see war take place, right? We watched how Michael and Satan fought in heaven, and you guys, they have battled before. You guys, we've read in Daniel even recently about how Michael battled against the prince of Persia, against Satan. And so here we have this other description of an account where war breaks out and they fought. And you just think, man, like for Michael's sake, they've battled before. And sometimes we will face the same battles again in life. Like God is not just a pass or fail God. He's not like, okay, just watching us go through life and go through trials and wage warfare. And then he's like, okay, good enough. You just get to pass. He's a pass God. And so you sometimes will go through the same trials until you have victory. And that's what I mean by that. Like we're going to sometimes face the same things. Maybe you just keep coming up against the same battle and the same battle. Maybe you're struggling with victory over drug addiction. Maybe you're struggling with victory over drug desire or some other, some like a people pleasing thing. Maybe it's stealing, whatever sin. We all struggle with many different sins. But we often have one that can be a prominent struggle or battle in our life. And the Lord, he will give us victory. And we oftentimes have to face the same battles again. We should see a change in how we are facing these same battles. Like when I'm, in the beginning, when it was just the drug desire, I wanted to use so badly and really craved things. And I was learning how to fight my battles through prayer and through the word and through saying no to my desires by the power of the Holy Spirit and what that even means. And I was learning all of that. And I would fail, right? Like I would mess up with certain areas. And then, but as you grow and as you continue to feed your spirit and deny your flesh, the battle begins to change. But I would face it. So again and again. And the same thing, like with marriage battles, I would face the same thing until I started to respond differently, until I started to trust what God had said. And then one day you wake up and there's victory and there's like no more battle over things. It's an awesome thing. So Satan and Michael had their moment where they fought. Then we know that the devil set out to persecute the rest of her offspring. And this is talking about the anti-Semitic mindset that we see so prevalent today. And it's going to be even worse in the Great Tribulation period. Okay. But it's that hatred for the Jews. And so at the end of chapter 12, we really see that come on the scene. Like it's always been around. And it's growing more and more in our day where people are just hating the Jewish people. But in this time, the Great Tribulation, there's going to be a major anti-Semitic just spirit. And it even says that the dragon is so enraged that he went to make war with the rest of her offspring. And then all who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Christ. So all Christians even too. Okay. And so there is just war specifically on Christianity. Then we jumped into chapter 13 and it was the beast of the sea. And this would have been yesterday, right? Yeah. And this is the Antichrist. So chapter 12 was really about the enemy, and it was a reflection of past, present, and future stuff. And then the Antichrist. So the beast, so the Satan is the dragon, and the beast refers to the Antichrist. Okay, just so you guys know, dragon, Satan, beast, Antichrist. There's also going to be a false prophet. There's a 3 because he's a mimicker. He's an Antichrist in place of Christ, tries to be everything Jesus is. Okay, and so he sees it rising up out of the sea, and the sea often in the scriptures is like referred to sometimes the Gentiles, sometimes the struggles. It's really like a place of evil and churning and chaos. And this is where the Antichrist comes out of. And he has 7 heads and 10 horns, and he's closely identified with the dragon that we just read about. So the Antichrist is closely identified. He's described very closely. There's a little bit of difference. And so closely identified with the dragon in chapter 12. He is not the dragon, but he is like him. Okay. And this is the Antichrist. And so then there's this mentioning of more descriptions of him, that he's like a leopard and his feet like a bear and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him this power, his throne and great authority. And the lion speaks of the Babylonian Empire, and the bear, the Medo-Persian Empire, and the leopard, a Greek empire. And the beast is really the Satanic Empire. And so it's just this influence of past empires that it's like the Satanic Empire will be like past ones that were evil and bad. So then we have this moment where one of his heads seems to be wounded, and it's miraculously healed. Again, imitation, right? Imitating what Christ did. So every step of the way, like you can learn things about the enemy, not to be obsessed about him, but he's an imitator. He tries to take the place of Christ. And so in God's kingdom, like we're learning how to be Christians. We're learning how to be a part of God's kingdom, how to be sisters in Christ. We're learning how to follow Christ, how to deny ourselves, take up our cross, follow after him. And so in Christ's kingdom, the difficulty will come first, right? The cross always comes before the crown. So we say no to ourselves. We deny ourselves. We try to think of others, not think of ourselves. And Satan, as an imitator, and let me actually finish that first thought. The cross and all of that comes before the crown, but then we reap in benefit. We reap in blessing. We reap in peace. And like just the unity that comes through biblical application and learning how to be a sister to somebody. So all of this, the whole kingdom of God and everything that it is involved, that involves in it. And then you have with Satan as an imitator, his is just flipped upside down. He wants you to feel good first, and he promises good things if you would worship him, turn to him, or listen to him, which he exalts self. Like that's his doctrine, is the doctrine of self. That's Satan's doctrine. When Jesus was on the cross, the people like wagging their heads, they were like, come down off that cross, save yourself. That's what they yelled out to him, right? Was save yourself, come down off that cross. Do you guys realize like that's the doctrine of the enemy? Save yourself, get off the cross. Whereas Jesus said, deny yourself, pick up your cross. But our flesh doesn't like to be in a difficult struggle. Our flesh doesn't like to hurt. We don't like to be uncomfortable. And so the enemy's voice will often line up with our flesh. And the Lord's voice lines up with his word and tells us the right thing to do, which will line up with denying our flesh. Okay. And that's the difference between the voices, the voice of the Lord and the voice of the enemy. But the doctrine of devils is always put yourself first. You can't make others happy until you're happy. But I don't know about you guys, but yourself is just as empty as a pit as myself is, and we will never fill it. We can never make ourselves happy. We have to more content ourselves, say no to ourselves, put Christ first and others first. And then guess what? We find this happiness and this joy. And so that's the doctrine of the enemy. He said it, through the people wagging their heads, save yourself and come down off that cross. And so if you ever, like, if you're picked up your cross and you're following after Christ and you're doing what's good and what's right and what's necessary, and it's hard, there's like a moment where it sort of comes to this peak moment and you're tempted to want to just crawl off the, the altar. There's this amazing verse in the Psalms. David, he wrote, bind the sacrifice with cords to the altar. Bind it, because none of us would desire to just crawl off the altar. None of us would. Oh, I'm teaching on Sarah. That's Jeanette. Do you want to say hi? Do you want to say hi to all the Lebanon?
I already did go like this. Hi, all of Lebanon.
And Renew.
And Renew. God bless you. Oh, hi, sweetie. Good to see you girls. Bye.
Okay.
One of you come here who's strong.
Lila.
Lila, come here. I've got a box.
Okay.
You girl.
Okay.
I'm going
I was like, who's coming in? All nice. Okay. So that is what the enemy will often do. That's my pastor's wife. I don't know if you guys all on there know that. That's Ken's wife. That's Jeanette. So anyway, the enemy will always say, get down off the cross and, bind the cords to the altar. That's always my prayer. Lord, this is hard. I'm in the middle. I know my flesh is just loud. My flesh is loud. Any of you guys ever fasted before? Yeah, fasted, like for the Lord kind of fasted. And so some of you might have had to have fasted for labs or something like that. But in Christianity, you can fast. You can say, you know what, I'm going to take 3 days, 2 days, 1 day, 1 meal, 2 meals, and I'm going to seek the Lord's face. And we should fast on occasion. Number one, it is healthy for us. But number two, you can draw closer to the Lord through fasting. You can break strongholds through fasting. You can just, hear his voice. And whenever you're making a major decision in your life, there should be fasting involved, like where you're going to go, what you're going to do, where you're going to work. God, what do you want from me? Thanks, honey. And so fasting, whenever you do it, let me just tell you, have your set time. Say, okay, I'm going to fast for 3 days. And because what will happen is day 1, day 2, you'll start to want to compromise. Like the flesh, you think, oh yeah, I can do this. I can go 3 days. And then you get hungry. And then your stomach starts growling. And then you're seeing what everybody else is eating. And then the dessert that night just so happens to be the best one. And it's never that good when you're not fasting. And so there's going to be all of this stuff and all of these reasons to compromise. And you're not, and God is good and gracious when it comes to, especially to fasting, because we can become so legalistic. But we should say, you know what, Lord, I dedicated this time to you. I'm going to do this. I wanted to hear from you. And then you'll watch your flesh get loud. It will get so loud, and you'll do dances with all sorts of thoughts. You'll think, oh, but I went this far. You'll have all sorts of reasons why you should compromise. And you know what? You'll feel terrible afterwards if you do give in. The enemy will just want to pummel you and beat you up for it. But the point is, your flesh can be loud sometimes. And that's a great verse in prayer. Like, Lord, bind my flesh to the altar. Keep me there. Keep me there, because it's hard to be on an altar. It's uncomfortable to be here. But the Spirit of God gives you the power and the ability to do it all, to say no to your flesh. God's Spirit gives you the power and the ability to say no to your flesh. I mean, did you ever think you could say no to drugs? Did you ever think you could be set free from certain desires? Did you think I just have to have different behaviors? I just have to have a different schedule? That was the counsel that the world gave me, is you just have to find something that you like doing and do it. And I thought, but I like drugs. I really like drugs. I am doing that, but it's not, fixing me. Okay, I like going for walks. So I can just spend my life going for walks with my dog. Like, who can do that? Like, it didn't add up and it didn't make sense. And it was really foolishness, but it was the best that they had. And then you come to the Lord, and it's like you learn about His Spirit and how through His Spirit you have power, you have ability. So just think of the biggest thing in your life right now. Like, think, what is the biggest thing in your life? Maybe it's overcoming a desire. Maybe it's overcoming a thought pattern. Maybe you have got a thought pattern in your life that is no good. And those can be so hard. Maybe you just are so prone to negativity. Are you prone to negativity? Are you prone to just thinking negative thoughts? Maybe it is an actual eating habit that you have, or lack thereof. Just think of one of the biggest things. Or maybe it's a guy in your life that you just obsess over and you can't stop thinking about him. Okay, whatever. The Holy Spirit, the Spirit of God, can and will and is able to change you and to give you the power and the ability that you need to say no or to think different things. God's Spirit can. And He tells you what to think. He tells you to take thoughts captive, and then He tells you what to think. Because I spent a lot of time for a lot of years, bless you, just trying to not think a certain way. So I would try to take my thoughts captive, and I would just be trying to like captivate them the whole time, thinking about them. And I was like, I don't get this. How do you take thoughts captive? But I'm thinking of them, and I'm, trying. And then I coupled it. I went to the Word, and there's Philippians 4:8 that says, think about these things, meditate on these things. And it gives you a list of things to meditate on. And so it was about denying thoughts, but it was also about adding biblical thoughts. And when you apply the truth and add biblical thoughts to your life, you will start to change and break your thought patterns. The Word will, okay? And you'll change. So, okay. So where are we here? So we were talking about the Antichrist, and so that was chapter 13. he was given a mouth that speaks blasphemous things. So all of chapter 13 is really about the Antichrist, the beast that comes from the earth. Satan, the dragon, gives the Antichrist like all of his power. So there's a deceptive power. And then there's also the mark of the beast that was mentioned before, and it's mentioned again here, and how you won't be able to buy or sell except if you have the mark of the beast. And so there, to be able to participate in the economy, to be able to go to the grocery store. Now we see a conditioning of this happening. Like we're so close to the end. I don't know if you guys know that. Like we have seen such a conditioning of mankind. We saw it through 2020. What I mean by a conditioning is a desensitization. Okay. They're conditioning you. They're desensitizing mankind to be able to receive the mark of the beast. And it's going to be like a nonchalant thing. 20 years ago, it was like, what? A mark to be able to buy or sell? I don't get this. This actually exists today. You can look up women, a woman, the first person to actually have the ability to scan her arm at the store because all of her info is on a chip. I mean, we all have chips on our cards. You guys get it, right? So there's been a desensitization and a conditioning, though, big time push through 2020 when through this world crisis of COVID, you could no longer go into a grocery store without a mask. And you had to submit to certain rules and to certain things in order to do it. And there was some of us who just completely rebelled against the whole thing. And that's great. But, what's important is that in this time that people's eyes are opened to it, because it's going to be the mark of the beast, and it's like not going to be accidental. You'll know that you're taking the mark of the beast. And just because, there was people that were weird through COVID and they said, oh, it's the mark. Like if you wear a mask, and that's not true. I mean, it's literally just the spirit just conditioning people. Okay. But we had our eyes open. We knew what was going on. Kids were lined up at school buildings. This is actually the minute we decided to pull our kids from the school we had them in and homeschool them that year. At the end of 2020 was when I was watching my kids in a line and they had a thermometer and they were scanning their heads and their wrists. And I thought, wow, like they're conditioning children to have to be checked before they can enter into the school system. And we just pulled the kids immediately because we're just not going to condition our kids for that kind of stuff. Nor did we want them being used to anything being pointed at their head. So, but it's just an interesting fact, right? Like we saw this stuff happen. And so it's really sort of normal now these days. Like, it's just in like our life now. And so it makes sense as to once the Christians are gone and we're all raptured and there's chaos and there's, and then it gets under control of the Antichrist and there's this false sense of peace that takes place. And he's going to say, hey, if you want to be able to participate in basic economics and buy and sell, then you have to take this mark. And it's all going to make sense. I mean, we've already somewhat gone through a similar thing. Okay. So we learned about that. And then we come to today and we get this little breather. Now, if you guys are like, oh, I don't like this. I really don't like the book of Revelation. There's so much just weird stuff. And you're kind of like, I'm just buckled up and holding on, waiting to get through. But I just want to encourage you guys, you can look for Jesus in everything. Like he was in every single day. He was there saying like, have wisdom yesterday. Right? Here is wisdom, understand. In the day before, it was like the Christmas story on Sunday. I just went to the Christmas story thinking about how God preserved his son, Jesus, and went into Matthew chapter 2 and read the Christmas story because it was mentioned in verse 5. And today we open up and it says, then I looked and behold a lamb. And it was Jesus right there at the start of our chapter today. Let's read chapter 14, verse 1. Then I looked and behold a lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 having his father's name written on their foreheads. So we have already read and learned about this 144,000 a few chapters ago. But here now, Jesus is with them. And Mount Zion is an actual mountain in Israel, but it's also in Hebrews chapter 12. it is mentioned because in comparison to Sinai, to the mountain that the Israelites had gathered at when they were being led out of Egypt, out of bondage, and when they were traveling through the wilderness. And I'll just read this, but in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 18, it says, "For you have not come to the mountain that may be touched and burned with fire, into blackness and darkness and tempest, the sound of a trumpet and voice of words, that those who heard it begged that the words should not be spoken to them anymore, for they could not endure what was commanded. And if so much as a beast touches the mountain, it shall be stoned or shot with an arrow." And so terrifying was the sight that Moses himself said, "I am exceedingly afraid and trembling. But you have come to Mount Zion." And so there's this comparison where the author of Hebrews is saying, you haven't come to Mount Sinai. And that was like God, the burning mountain, when God's presence came down on the mountain, and it was fearful and struck awe into the people, and they trembled, and they were like, oh my gosh, they were so afraid. Even Moses was afraid. And so there was a major separation. Jesus hadn't died. He hadn't come to earth at that point. And so there was separation between God and man, and there was a fear, a reverent fear, but it was more of like a terrifying fear. And he says, that's not the mountain you have come to. You and I live in the age of grace. We live after Christ's birth and death and resurrection. And so when that was being written, he says, but you have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, to an innumerable company of angels, to the general assembly and church of the firstborn who are registered in heaven, to God, the judge of all, to the spirits of just men made perfect, to Jesus. This is who we have come to, is to Jesus, the mediator of the new covenant, the new promise. This is the mountain that we have come to. And the one of the new covenant, that Jesus came and he died for our sins and he rose again, so that those of us who believe in that shall be saved from our sins and will not be under the wrath to come. So here we see Jesus standing on Mount Zion with the 144,000. Now, speculation says, is there this other sort of rapture that takes place for the 144,000? It's interesting. There's just some things that we just don't know. Like, we don't know in chapter 14 how this exactly like plays out. It does say, though, in verse 2 and 3, that, and I heard a voice from heaven like the voice of many waters and the voice of a loud thunder, and I heard the sound of harpists playing their harps. They sang as it were a new song before the throne. So here the 144,000, they're singing a new song before the throne. We know in the beginning of Revelation, it talked about how the 24 elders have harps. And here it says they are singing before the throne, before the four living creatures and the elders. And nobody could learn the song except for the 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth. So they are redeemed from the earth. They're the ones who are not defiled by women. They kept themselves pure. And again, that's not that being with a woman defiles you. Like, God said marriage is a good thing. God said, it's not good that man should be alone. But mentionings of women in the Great Tribulation period, Babylon and the harlot, the whore that we're going to learn about in a little bit, which is like the Roman Catholic Church. Okay, lots of stuff. But the spiritual fornication, okay, spiritual idolatry. So they've kept themselves pure. They're virgins. These are the ones that follow the Lamb wherever he goes. There's also reference verses to the Old Testament where God actually told Israel not to get married, and it was during times of great distress. It's like, this is not the time. So, both are true. And they did keep themselves pure from all of the influence that was taking place on earth at that time. And they're sealed. They have the seal of God on their foreheads. These were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits to God and to the Lamb. So speculation from the commentators, they wonder if there is not like this type of resurrection that takes place for them. We know they go through a lot of this up till now without being harmed. by all the things that could have harmed them and that were harming the other people on earth. So they're before the throne. And this is just a really neat picture of something so special for this group of people, the 144,000 Jews, okay, specifically. This is such, it's like it's a reality of the intimate and personal relationship that Jesus has with them. They get a new song. New songs are cool. I like hearing new songs. There's some old classic Christian songs that just bring back all the feels and all the memories. And I'm just like, oh, these are awesome. But then, when that new one comes on and you love it, this is a song that's new and it's just for them, and they're singing it before the throne and the beasts and the elders, which is pretty rad too. So they get this moment to shine. This is like the 144's moment to shine. And we're going to be like, whoa, this is so tubular. Like, you know what I mean? We're just going to be like, awesome, watching it all happen. These are the ones. So I've already read that. And sorry, lots of distractions today. Verse 4, they're redeemed from among men, and in their mouth was found no deceit, for they are without fault before God, before the throne of God. So in James chapter 3, we learn a lot about the tongue. And for these 144,000, there's no deceit found in their mouth. They're without fault. And the tongue is a very powerful, powerful thing. Do you guys know that? In James chapter 3, there's this warning that not many of you should become teachers, knowing that there's a stricter judgment. There are stricter judgments on teachers. God has a different standard. He's got a stricter judgment for people who hold and teach the word of God. And he says, for we all stumble in many things. If anyone does not stumble in word, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle his whole body. Just think about that verse. If anyone does not stumble in word, like we stumble in many different things, but if somebody doesn't stumble in word, he is a perfect man, able to bridle his whole body. I mean, isn't that what some of your issues were, is that you had zero self-control? You had no self-control. You couldn't stop. You couldn't stop drinking. Or if you could, some people do. Like some people, my little sister had an ability to just be weekends only, or she could stop the second she got pregnant. Yes, you did too. And so some people have this willpower that where they could stop. But the majority that come through, just they didn't have it. They had no ability and they were out of control, or even in their control, they were still out of control in the sense of they couldn't stop, even if it was somewhat seemed controlled. So this verse says that we stumble in many things, but if you don't stumble in word, you're a perfect man. You're able to bridle your whole body. What comes out of your mouth can define your path in life. Okay. What comes out of your mouth? The direction. That's the word I was looking for. Like your direction in life. Taming the tongue, you can bridle your whole body. Let's connect these two truths that James chapter 3, verse 2 says. Control the tongue, bridle your body. So we know the scriptures say that out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, right? And so let's talk about bridling the tongue. If you don't have a bridle on your tongue, if you say whatever you think, whatever you feel, I'm going to be saying a whole lot of stuff. My feelings change with the tide. They change with the hour sometimes, especially at this point in my life where I'm going through all sorts of crazy hormonal things. And so things change. And if I were to express every little thought and feeling, those thoughts that come out of my mouth are like seeds. Number one, they're feeding my own heart and mind. And number two, they also get planted into other people's hearts and minds. And you can change the course of your life, or you can influence a ministry even. You can influence a sister in the ministry with you, with what you say and what comes out of your mouth. Our words are powerful. The Proverbs say that the life and death are in the power of the tongue. That's what the Proverbs say. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. And so you will eat its fruit. Basically, whichever one you're going to serve is the one you're going to eat. So you'll either, you'll bear the fruit of life or you'll bear the fruit of death. Like, you can actually influence your children, your husbands, your sisters, those under you. You can point people to Christ. You can tame your tongue and just apply the scriptures that say, let nothing corrupt come out of your mouth. Don't let anything corrupt come out of your mouth, but what is necessary and good for edification. So if the things that we're saying are just building upwards, and that doesn't mean we don't say, like, the truth hurts, and sharing truth with somebody, it's not negative when it's, hey, like, I got to talk to you about some selfishness. Like, I know it's not that we're just these positive, encouraging people that's just saying everything good all the time. The truth will be hard to hear, but I'm talking about complaining. I'm talking about, complaining, talking about things that you shouldn't be talking about, talking about men in a light that you shouldn't be talking about men, and feeding the thoughts of yourself and somebody else that's around you. Does this make sense to everybody? And I know that this is applicable, like, to all of us, in some way, shape, or form. The thoughts I think towards my husband, towards my children, towards bosses, will influence the way that you act. Okay. It will influence your body language and really your direction in life. So if you can tame your tongue, now how the heck do we do that? So the scriptures tell us that out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so whatever you say is a reflection of what is in your heart. Okay. That's just the truth. I can discern where somebody's heart is at just by what they're saying, what's coming out. I can discern that somebody's very discontent and unhappy if they're complaining about their situation. So the heart, okay, matters. And it is, yes, God who changes the heart. But there is, like, God at work, God doing the work, the Holy Spirit at work, but there's also some accountability on your end too. So God works with us. God is the one who does the changing. He's the one that does the miracle. He's really gets the glory. But he says, here is how. Let no corrupt word come out of your mouth. Meditate on these things. And so that's where like, our accountability and responsibility to obey the Lord comes into play, because I can keep my mouth shut and everybody can. And how do I know this? Because people act differently around certain people. And you can, like, my kids act differently around each other. And then the moment I come in, they change. And then guess what? When, like, the way that Otis speaks to me, because he's kid number 5, and so he kind of gets away with murder, versus, when my husband walks in the room, that kid gets in shape. That kid straightens up and is like, oh, dang. And he knows it's instant guilt from the way he was just talking to me versus when my husband's presence is around. Or if you act a certain way all the time and then a staff walks in and all of a sudden you go quiet. I mean, that's like a number 1 red flag. Like, if you can't talk to somebody about a topic around staff, then I don't think it should be getting discussed at all, right? Like, if it's not out in the open or transparent, then why do we discuss certain things? Or like in front of a judge, you might be talking a certain way, but then you go in front of a judge, like, you shape up a little bit. So there is, like, you do have ability to have some control over the things that you say. And then again, this is all without even considering the Holy Spirit of God that works alongside of us and in us, and that gives us conviction. I used to lie like crazy. I was such a liar. I was a little liar and little thief. I've told you guys this. I would steal penny candy and then I would lie about it. And, and then you grow up and I was just the same as I ever was as a little girl. And I lied so much, I didn't even know the truth about myself with a lot of things. And I would embellish stories and, or I would completely tell false narratives about things and wouldn't even know. And the Lord, through time, he would work out these details. And I was a big people pleaser. And so this one time specifically, this was probably 19 years ago, I was in school ministry, and we were meeting with Peggy as a little staff group and praying. And one of the girls was expressing how she felt like she was the only one holding somebody accountable for a certain behavior. And I just came in with a lie. And I just said, oh, no, I've talked to her about that before. And it was a complete lie, but I cared too much about what they thought. And, the Lord was convicting me. And I left there just so defeated, like really just disappointed. And this is what we have to do. Like if you have to tell on yourself sometimes. There are lots of times when the Lord, how do I do not disturb? Do you know how to do not disturb? That's like my phone's going off like crazy and it keeps distracting me. Oh, right there. I got it. But I knew that the Lord wanted me to call Peggy and tell her. So I had to pick up the phone and say, I just lied. Like I haven't called her out on that behavior. And it was so hard. And Peggy just, she was like, okay, thanks or whatever. She was appreciative of it. It was more for me, like I was obeying the Lord and needed to do that. And so when you obey the Lord, and it's hard to do, it's hard to say, am I really going to call this person up and say, I just lied? Am I really going to, but that's what it looks like to humble yourself. Like you have to choose humility and say, okay, this is embarrassing. I don't know what she's going to think of me, but I know this is what God's calling me to do. And that's what matters. And I'm the one that lied in the first place and got myself into this situation. And what started happening is I started to be way more cautious of what I was saying without even knowing it, because it happened like another time. And I just, the guilt and the shame over the sin was heavy. And it was it became a reason for desire to not do that anymore. And so that was a well-placed shame, if you will, because sin does bring about shame. Sin does bring about guilt. And so those motivate us to want to change. And eventually, before a lie rolled off my lips, there would be a conviction. And I would say, oh my gosh, wow. And I would recognize the thought before it came out of my mouth, and I had a choice to actually say it or not. And it just continues to change. And then the number one thing that comes to your mind isn't even a lie anymore because God's done the work. So the tongue is an important member, and it can bridle your whole body. It can direct the whole course of your life. And we won't read the entire chapter 3, but going back into Revelation 14, there's no deceit found in their mouth. And so they are without fault before the throne of God. So in Ecclesiastes, it says where there's many words, there's much sin. I don't know if you guys know anybody who's just a chatterbox, and sometimes you'll just hear things that just are coming out, and the scriptures say with many words, there can be much sin. And sometimes we are just called to be quiet. But mostly we're called to tame our tongue. And the analogies that he gives are horses, ships, right? Like these are huge things. I mean, horses are pretty intimidating. They're an extremely powerful animal. I don't know if any of you guys have ever spent any time around them, but my horses could kill me if they just wanted to stomp on me, or kick me if I happen to be in the right position behind them. But I can control them with a little bit in their mouth. I can tell them where to go. That's a crazy thought. And yet we see that happen. or a huge ship. Like these are the analogies that James gave to taming your tongue. And so you have a little rudder on the end of a ship and it sets the direction. And so your tongue being tamed can influence your direction in life. All right, so verse 6, what time is it? Then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth, to every tribe, every nation, tribe, tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, "Fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and springs of water." And another angel followed, saying, "Babylon is fallen, the great city, because she has made all the nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication." Then the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast in his image and receives his mark on his forehead or on his hand, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation." Let's just pause there. So there's this proclamation of three different angels that we're going to read about. And the first one is flying through the air, crying out, "Babylon, Babylon has fallen." Now, Babylon simply means rebellion. That's what Babylon means. And that's what the word Babylon means. And we know that Babylon does exist today. One of the prophecies that we're waiting for, to happen is its destruction. Its destruction does not have to happen prior to the rapture happening. We know that it happens, this happens here, but this is also, prophetically, Babylon has stood for a religious system. It has stood for a political system, and it's an actual literal city as well. But Babylon in the scriptures has been all those three things. And so this angel crying out, that it's fallen, and that she, the city, really caused the nations to drink of her wrath of her fornication. And so, where the religious, political, and the actual city, just it's talking about spiritual fornication, okay? And it's an organized rebellion against God. And so the third angel, I'm sorry, that was the first angel that had said that, was to fear God and give him glory. The second one called out about Babylon. And then the third one said, "If anyone worships the beast in his image and receives the mark, then the wrath of God is poured out full strength. Okay, he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb." And verse 11 says, "And the smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever. They have no rest day or night, who worship the beast in his image and whoever receives the mark of his name. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus." Then I heard a voice from heaven saying to me, "Write, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes," says the Spirit, "that they may rest from their labors and their works follow them." So there's going to be warnings not to take the mark of the beast. Okay, that's going to be cried out. That's going to be warnings. And, people are warning even today, the two witnesses. And then, however this looks in the Great Tribulation period with the angel, again, some of this is a mystery and we don't understand it all. But those that do, make no mistake, you can contrast verses 11 and verses 12 and 13. So those that take the mark, you can contrast them with what takes place with the saints. Because the ones that decide to worship the beast, and worship, you guys, like, you might not have thought your life was a form of worship, but it was. Like, worship goes beyond standing and singing in church. Yes, that is worship. But your lifestyle is worship. What you think about, who you think about, what is your obsession? What are you living for? You can worship yourself. If you're just living for self and to please yourself, if self is on the throne and everything you do comes under that and is motivated by that, then it's yourself that you're worshiping. And again, I've already told you earlier, self is the doctrine of demons. There's only two camps. There's only two choices. You're either going to worship God or you're going to worship the enemy. And it might be dressed up into all of these things that sound good, like you're just trying to, fix your life so that you can make others happy or whatever, but it's not there. The deception, is powerful, but we know it's two choices, right? It's like you either believe in God, and that is a genuine belief that produces change and actions, and it's unmistakably fruit in your life, or you're worshiping the enemy. And so the one, like when you're worshiping, there's no rest day or night. And if you contrast that with verse 13, that said the ones, that hold to the commandments of God and faith in Jesus, they may rest from their labors. And everything is different in Jesus. Even work is different in Jesus. Like work doesn't feel like work to me. And yeah, sometimes days are long. Sometimes it's hard, but it's not burdensome. And so there's this thing, this rest that comes through patient endurance, right? That's what we see in verses 12 and 13, the rest that comes through patient endurance. And this is a patient and endurance that is needed like none other. We have to have patience. We have to have endurance, but this is specifically during the Great Tribulation period. So we won't have to experience this type of patient endurance, but he's saying this is where it really comes in, is those who are going to keep to these commands, okay? But then there's this blessing of all who die in the Lord from now on. You will be blessed. It's just not about your life now. It's not about your best life now. Then I looked in verse 14, and behold, a white cloud, and on the cloud sat one like the Son of Man, having his head on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud, thrust in your sickle and reap, for the time has come for you to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. So he who sat on the cloud thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. 17 says, then another angel came out of the temple, which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar who had power over fire, and he cried with a loud voice to him who had the sharp sickle, saying, thrust in your sharp sickle and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. So the angel thrust his sickle into the earth and gathered the vine of the earth and threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trampled outside of the city, and blood came out of the winepress up to the horses' bridles for 1,600 furlongs. So it's a pretty tragic and, nasty analogy or reality. It's the picture of what John is seeing. And, this made sense to them, these men, this nation, I should say, that were farmers, and the analogies that were often given were that of farming and or even vineyards. And Jesus is the one like that comes, okay, on the cloud, and that harvests the earth. The earth is ripe. And this isn't the end. And I know that can sound confusing, because it's like, wait, did he just like harvest the earth and then it's over? And so this is where some of that mystery of where are we at in the timeline. So in that timeline I gave you guys, it might help a little bit. And again, some of it is going to remain a mystery, but this is God collecting people, and there's going to be his wrath now poured out. We haven't even read about his wrath yet. Okay, so just step back for a second. We're in the middle of the tribulation period. We're just 3.5 years in. That ended with the 2 witnesses. And so all those things prior were just the natural catastrophes that would happen. Okay, all of those things prior were the natural consequences and the natural catastrophes, God sending his witnesses, trying to get people's attention. And then we have that time of reflection where it's the past, present, future of that chapter. And now there's like a harvest, and God's going to pour out his wrath. And that's what we get into starting tomorrow, maybe just a prelude of it. And then we read about the bowls of wrath. And this is now what we're about to enter into, is God's wrath being poured out on the earth. And he will, it's just heavy, and it's, I'm not going to lighten it at all, but you can still see his patience and his goodness. There is still going to be an opportunity for those who remain. There's even going to be the 1,000-year millennial reign, which is like pretty legit, pretty amazing, that we will experience with him, reigning with him, but that people on earth that are left will also have a taste of Christ's rule and reign, and then they will still be given another chance. And then the end comes shortly after that. Okay. So, what I would love to encourage you guys with is, while we're in the middle of this like heavy portions of Revelation, is to look for Jesus. Today I was like, okay, Lord, it's about to get rough. So I know I've been through this now long enough, and I want to see Jesus. I want to see you. And that was my opening prayer. And I opened up, and he's like, look, I'm standing on Mount Zion. And it was just like, look to the victory, look to his preservation. The fact that God was able to preserve these people out of the tribulation period. So God is able. I know we kind of talked briefly about that, but his ability to preserve, just like in Daniel chapter 3, you guys. So he preserves us here on earth, right? Like, we get through many things with him by our side. But in Daniel specifically, they were thrown into a fiery furnace, and God preserved them in the fire. And it really does reflect the Great Tribulation period, when with the 144,000, this seal of God that they had on their foreheads, it preserved them from all the chaos, like those scorpions, that demonic release that was taking place on earth. They were sealed from that. They were untouched. Just imagine it like this, okay? Like, I'm a movie person sometimes. So like, what was that? The Matrix, some of those scenes where there's like bullets and shards like flying everywhere. And then there's somebody just sort of like going through it slow-mo, but nothing's touching him. Okay. Like, there's some action movies you guys can think about. And it's like, this 144,000, there is such insanity going on in earth, and they're just untouched. And isn't this still true to us today? I mean, we're not going to experience what they experience, but we still live in trial. We still live in life. There's still hardship. And yet we've got the seal of God on us. Like, everything for us is God filtered, so we can trust him every step of the way. In Isaiah 26, I'll just read it, Brienne. Isaiah 26, this is one of my favorites, I think, just for difficulties. 26, 3 and 4 says, you will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you, because he trusts in you. Trust in the Lord forever, for in Yahweh the Lord is everlasting strength. So this verse says, you will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you. They'll tell you most of the battles happen in your mind. And when you're going through something troubling, something difficult, the temptation will be to not keep your eyes on Jesus. So we go through Revelation, I'm just like, whoa, we're watching this happen, we're watching that happen. We're like, gosh, Lord, this is crazy. And yet we can look for Jesus. He says, you will find me if you seek me with all your heart. And then when we're just in our life, this is the Christmas season. And I know what it's like to be away from your loved ones and in residential discipleship programs at Christmas time. I did 2 of them. Well, the second year I was allowed to go for a few hours, but I know it can be hard. I know it can be very bittersweet. And it is in those moments where you're going to actually look back and be like, that was the sweetest Christmas I ever had, because it was so simple, and really all you had is Jesus. And I know your staff is probably going to bless your socks off anyways, but he will keep you in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on him. So if there is like war in your mind, struggle, like even the thoughts of what you're missing out on, even the shame and the guilt of, hey, how I got myself here and now I'm not with my family. And there's all kinds of distractions, and emotion can be the number one biggest distraction for women. What we are feeling emotionally. Just bear with me. I know it's been a long study, but I just really think that this is for some of you guys. And the scriptures, just closing with, he will keep you in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on him. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Jesus wants to meet with you and speak to you, and he has a personal thing for each one of you guys, just like these 144,000 have their cool little song that's just them and Jesus that makes them feel like the special ones for that moment. Well, you'll have that moment with Jesus where you just feel like you're the only one in the world. And it's just you and him. You keep your eyes on the Lord. Keep your mind, whose mind is stayed on him. Don't let the thoughts invade to the point of distraction. Don't let the sadness and the guilt and the I'm not homes and the where, all of that distract you from having your mind stayed on Jesus. Trust in him, he says. Trust in the Lord forever, for in Yahweh the Lord is the everlasting strength. Okay, so I will just close with that today. You guys are about, it is time to buckle up, really. You might have thought it was already time in Revelation, but now it's like buckle up, because you're going to go through the wrath and the Scarlet Woman, and there's going to be some really interesting things that take place on earth. And you should do this while you travel through the remainder of Revelation. Take note of what happens in heaven and what's happening on earth. There is a stark difference when you read through the things that go on in heaven versus on earth. And we're going to be in heaven, okay? But just everything down here is going to be a lot harder and more difficult for those in heaven. So than those in heaven that are going to be rejoicing and waiting and crying out for vindication. All right. So I do hope you guys have a wonderful Christmas. You can pause the recording.